Hey everybody, welcome to Workforce Gaming. I'm Brad, here with Doug.
Hey.
Alan Wake 2 got its
hmm
final piece of DLC called The Lake House,
hmm
and Doug played through it, because
I
I
did.
think Alan Wake 2 you would still consider to be one of your favorite games from the last couple of years, correct?
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. Like
Okay.
I love Alan Wake too. I love the mythos of that world. Yeah, it's awesome. Yes.
Okay, so this was kind of billed as the final piece of Alan
hmm
Wake 2. There were lots of hyping this up, like, okay, this is going to be intense. It's connected to Control. It's da da
Oh
da 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 da. It's a whole big deal. This is the thing for Alan Wake 2 to kind of
hmm
put the final cap on it. So
yeah.
what is it? Because Night Springs, the last DLC, was very odd. I know that.
Yeah, no, Night Springs is like a fun sort of is Night Springs is like a very fun sort of like side thing, kind of like a one-off holiday episode sort of thing.
Yeah,
Um
exactly.
and then this is just everything I wanted from a Control sequel. This is the Alan Wake and Control universe firing on all Mythos cylinders, just absolutely going hard in the paint, and like everything I like about Control and everything about I like Alan Wake. Um,
Before you get
I
into this, do we
yeah.
need to preface this with potential spoiler warnings for things or not?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Th- uh, no, I mean maybe like a little bit for like Alan Wake too, but people aren't gonna be listening to this. They haven't played Alan Wake. Like I
You never know. You never know.
maybe, but okay, like the Federal Bureau controls there is involvement in Alan Wake too. Like that's just like that. You just need to know
I mean,
that.
that's good.
Yeah,
Okay, I think
that
that's not a spoiler. I feel like that's widely
yeah.
fairly well known. So
That's all you need to
continue.
know. Yeah, so the lake house is really so the setup for the lake house, it's oh my god, dude. The mythos in this game are so cool. There was a point in this, like I'm not gonna spoil the scene, but there was a scene like when something happens and I was like, this game is too good for the gaming community. Of just like of like people don't deserve this game. It's like this is like that weird show that like people like talk like get really attached to and it's only there for one season and it kind of disappears,
Yeah.
but people get really into it. I was like, this is that for me for games. Um so what the lake house is in the mythos of Alan Wake. So the Alan Wake incident that had happened 10 years ago, the FBC cordons off Cauldron Lake, where the Alan Wake incident happened, and they
Mhm.
set up a research center. And for the last 10 years, they've been doing nothing but trying to understand how the rules of Cauldron Lake work. You see a little bit of this in the game in the Alan Wake one, where so the concept of very loosely of how Cauldron Lake works is that it uses art and can basically bend reality on through
Mhm.
art. Alan Wake's a writer. There's people who are musicians who can kind of bend it to their will. Um, and then in Alan Wake 2, you see some evidence of the FBC doing experiments with poems. Like you kind of do these like little poem puzzles or whatever. But this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And what's been going on is that they have been testing all different types of forms of art to understand what the rules are of Cauldron Lake and how they can use it like to their own benefit. Like, okay, if
Okay.
we can bend reality, what sort of experiments can we run? But it's so fun because I think the thing that's like you kind of the FBC is kind of like this like mysterious organization. You're never quite sure how much they know. But I
Yeah.
just like that the setup for this is like, oh, they know everything. They know more than like Alan Wake about how this like thing works. They know the ins and outs of how the rules work. It's fun stuff too because it's kind of questions you have about like the rules of it, and then like they're explicitly trying to ask those same questions. So, for example, like there's a diagram. They're not a diagram, but you pick up a lot of like kind of the in control. You pick up a lot of like documents like redacted and stuff. You get those
Mhm.
similar types of documents in this one. Um, and there's like a question of like, well, what is art? Is art like could good cooking be considered art? Well, painting is clearly art, but like what about like like different things? And like they're trying to figure out like what is art to like
Mhm.
understand how this works. So it has this like really fun layer on top of all of it of just like discussing art in general and like Alan Wake's
Okay.
place is like a piece of art. And it's just hey man, it's so cool. I know as I've been talking nonstop. I could actually give like the context for for the actual for what the
I was
actual
gonna say,
thing's
so
about.
is this post Alan Wake 2? Is Alan Wake involved? Is it just Control? Like, who are we playing as? What anything at all here?
Oh god, yes. Sorry. Let me get back to my reviewer hat. Okay, so so the Lake House is a center where they've been investigating this stuff forever. You play as Agent Estevez, who shows up in Alan Wake 2. She's kind of like
Okay.
the FBC person who kicks in the door about halfway through the game. Is like, hey,
Hmm.
I'm the FBC and we're taking over this investigation.
Yeah.
The whole reason she's even, and you find out the reason how she even got there in the first place. So it's like it's lead up to the point where she then runs into Alan Wake again. So it's like it's
So it
kind of like
takes
a
place
pre.
during the campaign of Alan Wake
Yes,
2?
yeah,
Okay.
it takes place like during the campaign. To the point where like yes, it takes place during the campaign. Is the best way to put that. And like the whole reason Estevez is there is because she's investigating what's going on at the lake house, and actually has nothing to do with Alan Wake's return or anything like that. She doesn't know about it. She's just going to the lake house because they've lost contact with it, or they're checking in or something like that, and they get
Yeah.
there and everybody's dead. It's like, okay, that's all right. Okay, that's
That's
kind of it. So
not a
then
good
you
thing.
invest, yeah, and then you investigate further, and that's the whole thing where you're like learning that the facility. There's a bunch of new characters they've introduced who are like FBC agents, and like who run the research center, and they're kind of doing like illicit FBC experiments that are like against the regulations in certain ways.
Okay.
But it's really cool because I think the thing I really liked about Control, the idea of Control, was that it was this really kind of unique government agency, but you never actually get to see that government agency kind of like running. You see, you because you're playing it from Jesse's perspective, and most of her is like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
It's like that's her whole perspective. The thing that's really cool about Agent Estevez is that she's like an FBC agent. So as she's exploring stuff, she's not like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" She's like, "Okay," she's like going by like the regulations of what you do when you encounter like an unknown event that's going
Yeah.
on.
Okay.
There's sometimes when there's like a really cool scene where she is talking to something and she's using her like not like kind of like the guidebook of like what do you do
Hmm.
when you encounter a potential thing, and she's like going through kind of like a questioning thing to understand if it's a threat or not. So it's just really cool seeing that Control universe running as intended. Which I really liked. I mean, obviously you get there like the whole thing's just destroyed, but like just understanding how like an FBC agent works in the because you never actually see that. You
No.
kind of hear whispers of it. It's like because I mean, Control, they talk about like, oh, FBC agents showed up to my door and da 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 da, and so it's like, okay, you get to play like the X Files agents of the FBC, which is like that's all I wanted from Control was like that perspective. So this is just like, oh, this is everything I want from Control too. Like I'm kind of like I'm not done with like the control
It's
with like
that
control
fun.
now. Like,
There's that much finality to it that you're like, I don't need it anymore. This universe is over. We're good. No more Alan Wake 3, no
I mean,
Control 2. I don't want any of it. I
no, I mean,
understand everything that has happened and will happen. We're good.
no, it just did like the one thing I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if you had to play as like an X File agent, just like a normal Joe
Okay.
Blow guy investigating something. Like that's exactly what this is. And it's really cool the experiments that they're doing because like that when she's like investigating further, it's like, and I'm not gonna spoil them, but like one involves a painter. It's like, okay, what if we brought a painter to do paintings and like see if we what he can do with that. Um, but the I don't even want to spoil the other one, but the other one is basically trying to figure out how to use Alan Wake's powers through typing.
Okay.
It is so clever. It's such a fun idea, like within the mythos of Alan Wake, but it's also a super fun meta commentary thing on top of it. And like I know I'm talking around it, which is very annoying. But I'm like really trying to avoid spoilers, but it's just like it was
Yep.
such a neat idea that the thing I always liked about these games is like they know exactly when to use certain things and when not to use certain things. Like, okay, so for example, I like that they have not used Jessie at all
At
in the
all.
games
Yep.
because like she's the director of the FBC. So there's no reason she should be involved in the small shit, which is like all of the Alan Wake stuff. So it's like let's
Yep.
not use her. If we're gonna use Professor Darling from Control, there's better be like a good reason of why he would be there. So like it's really neat how they pull in those different things that all make sense. Like this whole facility makes sense that they would be investigating Alan Wake. They've mentioned some of the things because the FBC's been along forever. They're like, well, this isn't the first time we've been investigating Cauldron. Like there was an incident in 1970 and
Oh,
1960, and
cool.
if you know the Alan
Yep.
Wake stuff, you're like, oh, so like the FBC is known about weird Cauldron Lake stuff forever. Uh,
Alan Wake isn't the start of this universe. This
yes,
universe has all that backing and everything else.
yes,
So
which
the
is
game
just
it's
yeah. Yeah.
So the game itself, you're just like seeing like little like vignettes of like this is what happens in a painting in the lake house, and this is what happens when you play guitar in the paint, and this is what happens when you do this. So it's kind of like working through the different art forms throughout the house.
Yes, and you're trying to figure out like kind of why is everybody dead is like a big thing, and it's like basically
Okay.
it's these two. It's so there's like two main experiments. One is the one that's like the guy with the painter stuff, and one is the one that's like kind of messing with Alan Wake's writings,
Okay.
and it's basically they're trying to out research each other basically, and then things
Yep.
just kind of get out of control once they need to get like some actual movement going. Um, I think the only issue I had with this game is that, and it's like it's kind of spoilery, but it has that sort of like, and it's the thing with I had actually one of the issues I had with Control is I think Control is really cool, but like the gameplay I always felt of Control didn't really make sense
Yeah.
for for like the universe that I was trying
Hmm.
to do.
Yep.
So this game didn't really know once it got through the cool survival horror because it is basically survival horror Control, because you are in, let's say, not the oldest house necessarily, but oldest house adjacent facilities kind of thing.
Hmm.
It doesn't quite know what to do once, like after the survival, like how do you end these sort of things? I'm not going to spoil it. It's like a little MCU-y. It's like, well, we have this really cool story. How do
Oh,
we end it?
you're talking like final boss.
Yeah, yeah. Like it has like the
Oh,
fact that
okay.
it has a final boss like doesn't really make
Doesn't feel
sense, but
right.
it
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of does. Because it feels like it's doing all this very clever stuff, and it's like, well, with the mechanics we have, I guess we have to have a boss or something like that.
Now we need our knockout drag out superhero fight, and
Yeah.
yay, you did 2 hours of walking around and exploring, but now you need to fight.
Yes, exactly. And like
Yep.
the 2 hours of walking around exploring is like just absolutely, absolutely incredible. It's like it's so good, and it's like one of those like, oh man, because you're a fan of Control and Alan Wake. It's just like it's just how this game works. Um, just it just how clever it is of pulling things in when it needs to and then not pulling things in if it doesn't if it doesn't fit the story. I just think it's like really cool because it's the Alan Wake DLC, and like Alan Wake is like kind of sort of adjacent to it. Like it's like doesn't he doesn't really matter in the context of the DLC. So it just feels like a very separate control. It feels like a Control DLC with some like Alan Wake adjacent information.
So like the piece of Alan Wake that you're getting is more the setting more so than the character.
Yes, like they're investigating Alan Wake. You're not directly interacting with Alan Wake.
Yeah,
You're like in the facility investigating Alan Wake. You don't need to actually ever bring in Alan Wake the person because they're not trying to be seen by Alan Wake. And when you played Alan Wake 2, you never really interacted with the FBC because they were
fair
like
if you're happening in the
watching
middle.
him from afar. So they
Yep.
like are very good at drawing that line. So I think that's just what
Hmm.
makes it really much more special when they do kind of cross those lines. But yeah, if you're like a fan of Control, absolutely get this thing. This is like legit, just like straight up Control with Alan Wake mechanics. If you like Alan Wake, this is Control with Alan Wake mechanics. It's just like it's amazing. It was legit incredible. Like when I was done, I was just like, I don't know. I was like that was like that was like probably one of my favorite pieces of like Alan Wake Control universe stuff. Period. It's just
Damn.
so good. Yeah.
There you go. We are Workforce Gaming. You can subscribe to our channel, leave a comment below. There's links to Sports and Coffee as well. We'll see you later.
Bye.